Morning, everyone. Welcome back to Biblio Fitness. Hope everyone's having or has had a great day. Made some wonderful gains. Today's episode, I did want to broach upon the subject contained in aphorism 202 of the Dawn of Day. I am slowly but surely getting through this book, but slow and steady wins the race. This one is a very interesting one. It makes interesting observations, and I feel like it's very challenging. So might as well put myself to the test, and let's get through this one. It is called "The Care of the Health," and he makes a very interesting point from the very beginning that kind of lays out the rest of the whole thing, which is, quote, "We have scarcely begun to devote any attention to the physiology of criminals. And yet we have already reached the inevitable conclusion that between criminals and madmen there is no really essential difference, if we suppose that the current moral fashion of thinking is a healthy way of thinking." So, which is very interesting. We make the distinction between criminals and people we call lunatics, people with disabilities that are sick, but yet we treat them differently. Why can't we treat criminals the same way, but not through pity, but through medical skill and wanting to actually treat them in a good way? Provide them with means of expunging these behaviors that are causing him or her to be a hindrance to society. To be able to maybe change the location, to put them to a new sort of work, change their setting, be very honest and transparent with them in the probability of being able to resolve these said issues, right? And by what means can it possibly be, be achieved as such? And if you're causing too much of a hindrance for allowing them to commit suicide, which is obviously a very difficult thing to go through, but that's what he expresses. But it's just a very interesting observation because, for all our moral verbosity and pomposity, really, we're very vengeful individuals, and we use morals blatantly to express our desire for power, to be honest with you, and to be able to be the tyrant, to be able to say what is right and what is wrong in a way that is beneficial for you, right? That's the whole fucking point. You control the culture, you control the minds, and but we just don't we're just very vengeful individuals. We're very immoral in these so-called moral pursuits, and it doesn't really allow us to do what he says, which is allow them to go and do works, instill them with the belief or with the ideas and concepts that allows them to realize that through committing great deeds, they can absolve themselves of this remorse and sin. Like there's a way out. Like Heracles, for example, right? Like he murdered his wife and daughter, albeit he was instilled with madness by Hera because she was a jealous bitch. But that's the whole 12 labors. It was supposed to be 10, but 2 were considered invalid because he received assistance, supposedly. So, but that's the whole basis, through deeds, through suffering, through pain, you can absolve yourself of all of your sins, or to become a better individual, to look at it differently. But our current society doesn't allow it to look at criminality in that way. And obviously, criminality in itself is a very, controversial subject, because there are heinous acts that will never be, it's very difficult to just look at it as some sort of mental illness. But our current moral predilection is running contrary to what we say. because in today's society with vengeance, punishment has to be meted out for the sin, for the transgression. It's not enough that you get, you're made whole monetarily or whatever or otherwise, but there has to be pain inflicted on this individual. And so it doesn't really allow people who have now become, criminals to really do better. Isn't that one of the big problems, right? Like, having a record and all this shit really it limits limits one's options going forward in life, and you're always dealing with this stigma and all this other stuff. And he makes he's very sarcastic, but it's very nice how he says that, why can't we realize that to be a great and wise man is to love one's enemies and do good upon them and love them, and make them allies instead of casting them out and just causing more remorse and more resentment. A lot of us just, that's, these are all very complicated subjects, and it leads to very interesting questions for one to resolve bit by bit, right? And because we really don't give them a lot of opportunities, and instead of being Christian as we supposedly are, we're just wanting to mete out punishment left and right. We're just using our religion or whatever in order to become the arbiter of this supposed this justice and truth, this universal truth that's beyond understanding. Even though you can't understand it, you somehow get inspiration that it's this way, which is very, very interesting, but no one seems to, whatever. But I feel like, that's the whole point also, is the universality is also for everyone to get behind it. And then if you rule what it is to be good and what it is to be bad, you're going to win, really. Because you're the only one that realizes that you don't have to follow the rules to begin with. But, he also really does lead to, I guess, what you could call, I don't know if it's eugenics, really. But he does talk about how, the fact that we don't look at criminality in a way as how can we make this person more beneficial to society or beneficial to society again? How can we make them an active member once more instead of being a hindrance, instead of engaging again in criminality, for example, instead of wasting taxpayers' dollars, for example, and resources in maintaining these individuals that are not even productive. He says just like sick people. They draw on the resources of the healthy, on the time and the efforts and the energy. He says, we shouldn't be treating them terribly. He's like, those are terrible people. But it is the same concept. Instead of trying to get these people to become active members, how can we construct the morals and morality or a set of values or whatever in order to get, obviously not everyone's going to be absolved of those behaviors. It's not like everything could be resolved. That's just not how it works. That's proven in, The Sopranos, even though it's a fucking made up show. Those sort of individuals exist, like Tony Soprano, sociopaths that are never cured. This is something they're born with. There's nothing to cure. We always think that we can resolve shit out of people, and it's just for some people a part of their nature. Those sort of very intrinsically woven traits will never be able to get expunged. They're never gonna, that's just not going to work. But he does talk about, instead of looking, how back then, for example, how we used to look at the sick or the guilty, that the reason that they have these symptoms and stuff and such is because they committed some heinous act. They're possessed by some demonic force. When are we going to be able to look at it from the other way around? And he says that we're not ready for that yet. You know, when are we going to bring those other set of observations? You know, he does say, like, you know, when are we going to measure the health of a nation by how many parasites it can support? Which is a very interesting question. And I feel like that goes back to the whole resource allocation thing, right? Like, what is the percentage of our society that is technically useless, but yet we're still able to grow? Like, should that not be taken into account? Which I'm still not really able to process yet. I'm still trying to think that out of how that goes into the whole total picture. It's quite interesting. Like, how many parasites? Like, I know what he means. You know, how many people that are just drawing resources and not doing anything for the community. You know, that's why looking criminality differently is quite important. You know, how many people are in prison for the dumbest shit in the world, and their whole life is ruined just because they committed one act. You know, like one bad act can just, like, this obviously leads to a fucking rabbit hole. I don't want to get any further today. That's not, well, hell no. Hell the fuck no. Like I said, there's acts, there's impulses, I guess you could say, that will be very difficult to overcome and just look at as something that should be that from a medical perspective. You know, how can we help this? Like, you know, let's be real. So that is a complicated and loaded question. That's a lot of these are, really. But these are very interesting observations from him. You know, like, we are in, like I said, like, with all our rhetoric on how idealistic we are and how much we love this universal truth, we're just very selfish motherfuckers, right? So, you know, we're just very excitable, the lower classes. Like, he always tries to make that distinction, how, you know, he talks about after how the nobles, you know, when they hear an exciting speech, they remain composed. You know, they have to exhibit that control over themselves, that power at all times and such. And while we just get ecstatic and we start foaming at the mouth, and as it were, which is quite hilarious because, you know, you could make that observation all the time, but you get quite crazy. You know, people in college just screaming because they don't have an argument is absurd. Just shows the decline that we are in, you know, really. I'm just making that observation, especially in mediums like music and art and such, like in art, how that's declined, even though that's way off topic of what I was originally talking about. But well, that honestly will be all for today. It's a very interesting aphorism, as I guess you could, you know, it does bring a lot of questions, you know, to bear. You know, why can't we look at it differently? Why is the penal code so vengeful? While we're always saying that we love everyone deserves love, but, you know, we're so quick to want to lock people away or want to murder them and kill them for our truth, because they invaded upon our truth and our reality, and we can't never relinquish that, you know. So we have to do what we have to do. Cause he did. So I guess that will be it. Love y'all. I hope y'all make some amazing games. Tomorrow is lower day for moi. Let me get bigger. Make some games, people. Love y'all. Peace.